The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest stories in the NBA.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast.
Jimmy Butler. We've got more stuff, more twists, more turns. The Heat announced a couple hours before tip-off that Jimmy Butler is going to be suspended not for 7 games, not for 2 games, but indefinitely after leaving Monday morning's shoot-around early after being informed that he was going to be coming off the bench and replaced in the starting lineup by Haywood Highsmith. So a lot of interesting things here. They announced it as a 5-game suspension at the very least, but make it clear that it's going to be indefinite. Now, what's interesting about those 5 games, David? It's literally the amount of games they had, starting with this Orlando Magic game, that they had until the trade deadline. So the Heat buying themselves some time here between now and the February 6th trade deadline by suspending him. We talked a lot for the Monday morning episode about what do you do with Jimmy Butler. And you and I agreed, you can't play this guy. Some way, shape, or form, you cannot play this guy anymore. He cannot be a part of this team. And by goodness, like the Heat figured out a way to make him not part of this team. He left shoot around early. I heard from players talking to people at the game. It wasn't like this big, it wasn't Minnesota.
All right.
It wasn't a big deal when it happened. He didn't kind of make a big, he just left. He was informed that he wasn't going to be in the starting lineup anymore, and he left. Still, that is technically against team rules, but the Heat are clearly looking for any and every reason to suspend Jimmy Butler, knowing that it's what's best for the team right now, and they went ahead and did that, and they did it indefinitely. This is, I don't know that the punishment meets the crime, but that's not the point here. The punishment has nothing to do with the crime. The punishment has everything to do with the trade request and what's best for the team on the court. This is what they decided to do.
I wonder if the intention was to play him, or if they knew that demoting him or removing him at least from the starting lineup would set him off the way they did, and it could kind of free their hands to say, well, hey, he just walked out of practice. He can't do that. Like that's, I don't know. I don't know how, if there were any kind of machinations or there was a thought process behind all this. You assume that they knew that he was going to be upset. I don't think at this point in time, Jimmy Butler would be like, oh, yeah, this is great. Yeah, bench me. I love this process.
Right. No, that's the part that I don't understand. Why would Jimmy be upset about this? Is he the only one that thinks he's actually giving effort? I know he tells the media that he's trying hard, but he knows that he's not trying hard because he's not doing it on purpose.
The level of pride that he has is so great. And I mean, the ego it takes in order to be an NBA superstar at the level that Jimmy's been at for so long. You don't get to that point. Like, I mean, we've seen this as players age. They don't like demotions. They don't like being told they can't play as many minutes. Like, they think they can play at an all-star level throughout the entirety of their life, much less, a shortened career. And so they don't want to hear that. Like, I think Jimmy he believes in himself so completely that he really does think he could still be a game changer, even when he's clearly not been the player that we expect him to be.
But he doesn't want to be the game changer. That's like this guy gets clearly upset enough to leave shoot around early, knowing that this organization is looking for any and every reason to suspend you again, unless he's doing it on purpose now too. But I can't imagine that he's willingly wanting to lose millions of dollars. He's already lost $3 million this month.
He's going to get it back, right? In appeals.
He probably will, but it's still money deferred for a year. I'd rather have $3 million now than $3 million a year from now, maybe. Even if they have to give up, half. I mean, look, I know he'll be okay, but I can't imagine that he wanted to get suspended, in other words. But I don't know. He could. Who knows?
You got to put up a front on both sides. Like the team has to do what they can to kind of protect themselves and show, well, we're trying to set a bar here. We're trying to support players 2 through 15 here. We're doing everything we can. We gave him every opportunity. We just said, you know what? You've been a little bit of a distraction. We were going to bench you. That didn't mean we were going to not play you, or at least that's the.
Unless it did mean that we're not going to play you, and then.
Well, it's possible. I'm sure Spo could have come up with some excuse to say, no, I didn't I thought the guys out
We
in the
just
floor,
couldn't.
even when they were down
We couldn't
14,
find any minutes for Jimmy.
we couldn't find any
We
minutes
were
for
losing.
Jimmy.
We were down 14 to the Orlando Magic, and we just still really couldn't find any place.
We weren't
to
sure
put
about his
Jimmy Butler.
conditioning,
Right.
after the long suspension.
it's-
I'm sure they would have come up with some excuse or something like that. But it's just like, and
No,
from
the
his
point you
perspective,
made-
he's like, he's got to be pissed off too. It's like, he's got to be able to show I'm a competitor. I'm still a hooper. I want to be out there. And the fact that the team's not playing, but then he goes and posts something on social media where it's kind of tongue in cheek, and it's like, it's silly. Yeah, the whole thing is just a little silly at this
Well,
point.
I think to your point before, though, like, did the Heat do this intentionally, knowing that they could maybe instigate this sort of reaction from Jimmy?
Push him over the edge.
Yeah, and I think they are pushing and prodding him. And when he left the shoot around early, the sense I get is they're like, all right, cool, another reason for us to get to suspend this guy. Very important too that this team does not have any national TV games between now and the trade deadline. So that's sort of what allows you to go from a definite type of span on the suspension, whether it's 6 games or 7 games or 2 games, to indefinite, because they don't have another. So this buys them time. This is clearly a move aimed at the trade deadline. This buys them time. Jimmy cannot get hurt because he's not playing, and he's not going to be with the team, so that the team can focus between now and the deadline on what happens. Now, if for whatever reason Jimmy Butler is still on the team after the trade deadline, you have a meeting and you say, okay, how do we handle it then? But for now, that's the can kicked as far down the road as possible, and that's essentially what the Heat just did here. We do have some more news here. Bradley Beal got some reporting during this game from Fred Katz over at The Athletic, reported that Bradley Beal will not accept a trade to the Chicago Bulls. He says, quote, "There are destinations Beal would consider approving. As The Athletic reported last week, going to a winning team would be his first priority. However, cold weather cities, including Chicago, are less attractive to him," the source said. "If a team has a losing record and a chilly winter, it won't be on Beal's list. Of course, this complicates the Suns' pursuit of Butler." This is the luxury you have when you have a no-trade clause, David. He's like, I don't like that weather. It gets below 40 for too many months out of the year. That's off my list. That's the luxury that Bradley Beal has with the no-trade clause. He is not going to waive that no-trade clause. And this removes the Chicago Bulls as a potential suitor that can land Bradley Beal in a 4 or 5 team mega trade that brings Jimmy Butler to Phoenix and relief to the Miami Heat. So
we just got snow in the Panhandle. There's no place that's free of the cold winters, Bradley. You got to waive it for some team. I don't know. I mean, like, I get it, but that just basically means, I don't know. I don't think they can send Jimmy to his preferred destination of the Phoenix Suns. Like, they're going to have to find another place that might be willing to.
Yeah, I mean, even before, I'm sorry, but before we even get to that point, and you're right, maybe, perhaps, but like, what's now? Okay, before we get to that, what's the team that meets Bradley Beal's criteria? To be clear, I think he would be, at least according to the verbiage in this report, willing to go to a cold weather team as long as that team was winning at a high level. And the first team that comes to mind is Milwaukee, but Milwaukee already came out here and said, we're not interested in you, Bradley Beal. So I don't know where Bradley Beal is trying to, I don't know if he's got a list of preferred destinations. He's got obviously preferred destinations. It's been reported that he might be willing to waive his no trade clause to go to a winning situation. But what's the winning situation, cold or not cold, that makes any sense for Bradley Beal? I can't find that. And if it's going to be a losing team, but at least it's warm, I mean, are we talking about Charlotte? Like, what are we talking about here? I mean, is he trying to get it to the Atlanta Hawks, perhaps? Like, that's a fringe playoff team in the East with warmish weather. I mean, my brother lives in Atlanta. It was snowing there, too, so I don't know if that counts. But, like, that's
a lot of
the part
options
that I don't
there.
understand here. It's not a lot of options, Brad. Sorry. Is he trying to get to Miami? Orlando?
Trying to get to Orlando? I mean, they could sure use the shooting, I suppose, but they don't have a place for him on that roster.
No,
I mean, I
don't. Bradley Beal.
Yeah, no, they don't want to commit that kind of cap space to a player.
So
like
that's
that.
so that's where we end up with what you said before. It very much complicates Jimmy Butler getting to where he wants to go. And so I think this is a situation where you look at the other teams that could potentially be in the market for Jimmy Butler, and the Heat might have to start talking to those teams a little bit more if they're not already.
And look to him to exercise his option next year and pick up that $50 million, because none of the teams that he's going to get traded to, they're looking at him as just a 1.5 year rental, and you get an extra year. You can compete this year. You can contend this year if you're a team like, say, the Memphis Grizzlies.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you can take on Jimmy Butler's salary, you figure it out. And then you kind of except that he'll probably opt in next year, and he's not going to get the extension he wants. So he's not going to get it from Miami. He's not going to get it from Phoenix unless they work out some trade over the summer. Again, what we've talked about from Miami's perspective, oh, well, maybe you can look into a trade this summer. Well, maybe, but that would be falling on some other front office to have to negotiate that kind of deal with Phoenix, and who knows what'll play out then. But it doesn't seem likely that he's going to get the deal that he wants. And, well, as far as Miami's concerned, that's not their problem anymore. They've made it clear that they don't have a future with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy doesn't want a future with Miami, and so you move them to wherever you can. Now, look, I see a lot of comments, and I just want to address this really quickly because I see a lot of comments saying, "Oh, this is Pat Riley's still kind of sleeping at the wheel, or he's not. Why isn't he getting this done?" Because it's not his choice. He'd trade him to goddamn Timbuktu if he had the option, but he doesn't. Who's going to take on that $50 million salary? There aren't teams that want Jimmy Butler, and you have to, you have to understand that. Like the deal isn't there. And if the only deal that's really been available, or the one that they've explored the most often, is a deal to Phoenix, well, that all hinges on Bradley Beal, and Bradley has all the options in the world, and he can say no to any one of them. And he just doesn't, he doesn't choose to want to go to Chicago, Milwaukee, or anywhere else. And you have to get buy-in from both other teams, those players. And it's not something that Miami's just like kind of sitting on their thumbs and not doing anything. They're trying to actively shop him, but there isn't much of a market. They didn't expect that they'd have to be forced into this midway through the season. Their expectation was, as we talked to Tim Bontemps of ESPN last week, they thought they were going to have that play out over the course of the season, and then they were going to find a way to negotiate over the summer and see what happens. Well, that no longer is a reality. Right. So, and
naively so, might I add, but that's where they end up being. And to your point, you're like, to make it the Heat are aggressively engaged in the trade market.
They don't want to deal with this.
I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what could make it more clear that this team does not want Jimmy Butler on the roster anymore. They are actively engaged in the trade market, trying to find anything. I think they would like to send Jimmy Butler to Phoenix because that sends Jimmy Butler. It has nothing to do with honoring his trade destination. It just sends him to the other conference, and frankly, a team that you're not going to have to worry about ever seeing in the NBA Finals, because the Suns with Jimmy Butler, they're not making it that far either. And so I think that's sort of like, hey, you kind of exile him off to this island in Phoenix, and we don't have to worry about this anymore. And but I also think that it doesn't make sense for any of the other teams that could be even a little interested in Jimmy Butler to put forward their best offer right now. Why would for the record, Memphis, despite Jimmy Butler making it clear that he does not want to get traded there, that noise has not gone away. The Milwaukee Bucks, that noise has not gone away. There have been several constructions involving the Chicago Bulls. Some of them, there have been several constructions involving the Chicago Bulls that have been talked about. And I don't know that noise had not gone away as of Monday afternoon. And I don't know what happens now after the Fred Katz report comes out. But that noise was as recent as anything else. So there are plenty of teams that are willing to get engaged in this stuff. I do still wonder if Memphis or Milwaukee would be interested in Jimmy Butler for different reasons. But we'll see how it plays out. But it doesn't make sense for those teams to put their best offer forward, because I know it feels like the trade deadline is right around the corner. But a week in the NBA is a very long time for things to change. And a team is not going to put their best offer forward a week before the trade deadline. The only team that's actively putting their best offer forward right now is Phoenix, because they want Jimmy Butler in that building as soon as possible, because they believe that he can make them better. And they need to stack up wins in the Western Conference to try to make the playoffs here. But for Memphis, for Milwaukee, they're not going to have to do it. Miami knows that too. And so this thing probably will go right down to the deadline.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. Used to go to comedy shows all the time. Me and my friends in college used to go all the time. It's a blast. You don't even need, alcohol. You just go and have fun and laugh. It's a comedy show. That's the whole point. Just go have fun. Gametime has a new called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
You are Locked On Rockets Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Houston on the Locked On Podcast Network.
I mean, there's so much good here. There's a lot. This team goes out there tonight and, early on, it was very similar to their game the other night against the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I'm telling you right now, we're watching this team really grow up to another level in front of our eyes. They've gone on the road now. Think about this. They've gone on the road. They played the top 2 seeds in the East. And they've beaten them both in their place. And they beat the top seed in the East at their place in the game before. So they've beaten 1-2-2 or 1-1-2 in their last 3 games. That's pretty darn good. You really think about what this team has done since the last time they played Boston. They've won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of 11. 9 of 11 since that game where they lost 109-86. And tonight I really felt like, again, this was a team that went out there and, they got punched a little bit early. Boston came out firing. I've loved something that I've loved from the last 2 games is that, the energy. You could really feel the energy in both buildings, in Cleveland and there tonight in Boston. Playoff type of atmospheres. And this team has passed the test in those kind of atmospheres. Moment wasn't too big for them. Do things get tight at times and did they slip up at times? And were there moments of the game where it's kind of like, oh gosh, here's the offensive issues this team is presented with quite consistently based off of what they have. But what do good teams do in these moments? They find their way to wins. They grind it out as best as they can. And look, tonight, if you had sat down today and kind of spelled out how this game goes in a scenario where the Rockets win, you would probably said, well, that means Jalen Green probably came out and had a really good shooting night. Alpy probably did some really good stuff. And the other guys kind of do what they typically do. Never in your life would you say, well, Dylan Brooks is going to go for 36 and knock down 10 3-pointers. Amin Thompson is going to go for a career-high 33. I mean, you would have expected really good out of him because he's been awesome, but I wasn't expecting a career-high 33 tonight and 10 rebounds and 4 assists. Did he have a block shot? And a block shot. And he only missed 6 shots from the field. And he knocked down a 3. And he knocked down 6 of 8 from the line. All of that happened tonight for this team. And then, oh, by the way, Alpy, not a good night. Jalen Green, buns. Absolute buns in terms of his game tonight. And the Rockets walk out of there with a 114-112 victory. Keys to it, go look at it. Didn't turn the ball over. 7 turnovers tonight. Actually got beat in the rebounding department by 2. But points off of turnovers. Celtics had 15. They capitalized on 21 of them. They got out. They set the pace. I just thrilled with the effort tonight. Thrilled with the attention to detail. Thrilled with the meeting the moment. Meeting the atmosphere. That, again, is a sign to me that we are watching a team blossom at a rapid pace. At a very rapid pace. And then they also do it, look, for their coach. Now, was his leaving over there self-inflicted? Of course it was self-inflicted. He's admitted to that. He's talked about it. He made mistakes. That's why he's not the coach there anymore. He would have still been the coach there if all that stuff had not gone on. He's here now. And now he finally gets to beat them. Had not beaten them since joining the Rockets. Gets that win. You know that has to feel pretty good tonight to get that victory. And look, it's an important one too. Not only is it about the making a statement and reminding everybody that, yeah, this isn't a fluke. Look, the Rockets are in a West that's still, I've said it. I think that they're only teams that are going to compete with them for that top seed, that second seed, is going to be Memphis and Denver. I do mean disrespect to the Lakers and the Clippers. I don't think that they're real. I think those are the only two teams that can hang around. And I don't even necessarily think that Memphis can do it. And look, the Rockets also have the tiebreaker over Memphis. They're good, but I just don't think that they're as good as the Rockets. All these wins matter. And then on top of it, doing it against good teams, really good teams, matters even more. It's a huge confidence booster for this team. I don't think that they're lacking in confidence. They wouldn't be winning all these games if they didn't have confidence. But they did so much tonight. And then to have, again, one of the guys who carried you all night long get a chance to knock it down. And look, Amin Thompson's range is not very far at all. It was just within his range, thank goodness. And he knocked it down. And we are watching the moment of a career happen in front of us where he's going to that next level. He is ascending rapidly, and his status in this league is only going to continue to rise. And boy, oh boy, as I always say, if he could ever knock down an outside shot consistently, this man is going to be, he's already going to be one of the better players in the NBA. He would be one of the best, without a doubt, top tier talents in this league if he could do that on a consistent basis. I can't be picky. He might not be that guy. That's okay. What he's doing right now, insanely effective, insanely good. And he did it again tonight. Let's talk about him. Let's give some more praise to him and to Dillon Brooks. Dillon, the villain. A lot of people hate him. I was always skeptical of him when he landed over here with the Rockets just because of the personality and what we've seen with him in Memphis. But man, he really is a key cog to this team, and he is not getting enough love this season for what has gone on out there on the floor for this Rockets basketball team and how they performed.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. The one bet you could look at, $5 on the NBA tonight. The Lakers head east to play the Sixers. FanDuel likes LeBron and company and has LA favored by 4 in Philly. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus. FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
The New York Knicks annihilate the Memphis Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
Arguably the Knicks' best win of the season. I would call it, at the very least, their most complete. I would probably, take that next step and call it their best win of the year against a Memphis Grizzlies team that we were just talking about at pre-show. One of 5 teams in the NBA coming into tonight with a better record than the New York Knicks. Top 10 offense, top 10 defense, been hovering around top 5 in those two categories all season, and the Knicks absolutely demolished them. A 37-point victory, 143-106. Knicks score over 140 for the second straight game. First time doing that since 1965. 2 of the top 15 scoring performances in Knicks history, and they come back to back. They set a season high with 52 bench points, a season high with 31 points in transition, nearly a team record with 20 steals, only 2 off on that total. Just a ridiculous effort. Memphis made it kind of competitive at times in the second half. It was one of those games where it felt like the Knicks were playing nearly perfect and should have been up way more at halftime than they were. But basically put this game away with a 16-0 run in the third quarter in under 3 minutes. Some Mikal transitions, some cat layups, capped by back-to-back Brunson threes. And then in the fourth, when Memphis cut it to 16, 6 straight points from Campaign, a Mikal 3, 11-0 run. Good night, Grizzlies. Just an epic second half, an epic performance for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, and anytime you have to go beyond, I feel like this should be like a rule of thumb, for Knicks achievements. If you have to go past the 1970 championship team to find any statistical anomaly, you're doing something pretty freaking good. Because normally those are the standard bearers. We keep hearing about Clyde's triple-double record, and the last time that 2 Knicks made the All-Star starters at the same time, all this stuff. All usually everything's held by those 70s teams. So the fact that they did something that even those teams didn't do is crazy to think about, because they're the gold standard, the golden age of the Knicks for good reason. So I mean, this team, they're starting to find their way. I feel like I think I've noticed that, and I mean, we're going to talk about how good the bench was in a little bit, but I've noticed, I think my biggest trend from these 2 games is that Tibbs is trusting that bench more, and it's allowing the starters. I mean, we've talked about, I know it's been a very polarizing topic, very, you're either very much on one side or very much on the other in like the discourse around this team. But you and I were kind of the opinion, like, I think this team's getting a little rundown. Maybe they're not like super rundown, but like you could see it in certain performances where they seem to have dead legs and whatever. These last 2 games, they have that nice long layoff in between games to get their stuff together, get their bodies right, whatever. They come out in that Kings game and just run them off the floor. And then they come out and do the same thing in this game and just run these guys off the floor. And the Grizzlies are a team that loves to run. So like the fact that the Knicks were able to outrun them, I think speaks volumes about where their energy level is at right now, how all the guys are feeling. I mean, OG Anunoby, 7 stocks in this one again, back to his true form there. I mean, you had it's like everybody that touched the floor recorded a steal in this game, it feels like. So, there's plenty of them to go around, but like everybody getting those hustle plays, those hustle stats. Just a beautiful game to watch. If you're a Knicks fan, obviously, Grizzlies fan, maybe not so much, but I want to give props. Like, I don't always agree with his style of analysis, but I really liked Alan Hahn's stat that he pulled at the pregame for MSG, which was, he pointed out that the Grizzlies were one of the more turnover-prone teams in the NBA, and that the Knicks had snuck into top 5 in points off turnovers in recent weeks in the whole NBA. So the Knicks really took advantage of a team that does not take great care of the ball and managed to just absolutely run crazy on them, really turn every possible opportunity into transition points. And I just loved even not off of steals and stuff, even off rebounds, just like Mikal Bridges with his head up, just looking to throw it the whole court, or Mikal Bridges running and cherry picking, down the other end, and knowing like, hey, the second that this ball gets in someone's hands, I should already be released and going towards the other end, because this team is apparently not great in transition defense either. In addition to not being great taking care of the ball, but just all in all, a fantastic effort all around for the Knicks, and just a really balanced game. Like, that was the best part about it. They scored all those points, but they weren't overly reliant on the starters to totally carry them. It was just the whole team got involved and everybody had their moment.
Yeah, and this is the only caveat. I'll put on it all night, and then it'll be all just incredibly effusive from here. Like, I think this was about as bad as the Grizzlies could play. Like, even when it wasn't the Knicks playing great defense, they were throwing the ball all over the court. Didn't really pick on Cat in pick and roll the way you would expect them, but I thought Cat played a pretty good game, and a big part of it, which we'll get into more next segment, was that I thought Mikal just had an exceptional effort on Ja Morant that was reminiscent of what he did against Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the first half of the first Oklahoma City game, and then he just continued it throughout. But this is, I don't know if we did a good enough job driving it home, but this is sort of a season-defining stretch for the Knicks. Like coming into this West Coast road trip, right? They had been the epitome of a mediocre basketball team in January. They were 6-6, a 0.0 net rating in that time, and all season long, Alex, like I give credit to James Edwards over at the Athletic, like pulled this stat. They were coming into these last 2 games 13-15 against the top 10 seeds in both conferences. I didn't realize it was that bad. They were under 500 against playoff and play-in teams. They were 17-1 against the bottom 6 seeds, which of course was very similar to their profile a year ago, but ultimately concerned. It was like, all right, can they not only like scrape out wins against some of the best teams in the NBA, can they dominate some of the best teams in the NBA? They've done it against the Wolves early this year. They did it against the Nuggets before the Nuggets ultimately started to figure things out. And now you play a Kings team that coming in had won 10 out of 12. You wreck them. Memphis, I was even a little low on them. 5th in offensive rating, 6th in defensive rating. I mean, just absolutely the profile of a championship team And the Knicks wrecked them. They like from minute one, even though it was close on the scoreboard, like this was a annihilation, as Mike Breen put it. I think that is the best possible term for it. I'm with you. Like I thought the transition was revelatory. It felt closer to preseason, where I don't know how much you remember this. Like it was just McHale, Hart, and Brunson looking like they hadn't missed a step, and those three connecting over and over and over again. And you said it, like this was just a redux of that. Like with McHale streaking down the court, OG had one where he ran ahead of everyone for a dunk, and it just sort of felt like Memphis did not have any kind of answer on either end. Totally complete performance, total butt kicking. And if you were like me and you were feeling a little bit pessimistic about this team, shows you how quickly things could change. It just felt like everything that could go right did go right, and pretty much everyone across the board had like close to an A+ game for the Knicks.
Yeah, and crazy that, on a night where Brunson got into foul trouble early, which is really uncharacteristic for him, and had to kind of take a seat early on in this game. Like caught his fourth foul in the second quarter in this one, which is not something that he's normally. That's more of a cat trait than a Brunson trait. You know what I mean? And the fact that they were still able to, persevere through that, have some minutes where Deuce was like their de facto primary ball handler out there at times, and still managed to pull it together in those scenarios. I mean, I just thought this was as good of a game as you could have asked for given the circumstances, considering that, I mean, Brunson only played 25 and a half minutes in this game. Yeah. And Josh Hart, who's been, I mean, like having to play like 40 minutes most nights lately, even on the games where they're winning, like even the other night, like against the Kings, everybody else had to, it got sort of a night off, quote unquote, like around 30 to 35 minutes, and Hart still had to play 40. He gets some time off too, and they still squash like this. It's just crazy stuff.